What if the happiest day of someone's life turned into a nightmare in seconds? A beautiful wedding, a smiling bride, a nervous groom, but then the preacher notices something no one else can see. Something is wrong with the bride, her eyes, her hands, her very presence. It is not what it seems, and the moment he confronts it, everything changes. What secret is she hiding? And who, or what, is really standing at the altar? You will not believe what happens next. Watch closely, because once you see it, you will never look at weddings the same way again. Stay until the end, if you dare. The church smelled of fresh flowers and wax. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass, painting the aisle in fractured colors. Guests sat quietly, faces full of anticipation. The bride walked slowly toward the altar. Her dress shimmered under the soft light, every detail perfect. But something felt off. The preacher noticed it first, a flicker of hesitation in her step, a strange tension in her shoulders. Like she carried a weight unseen, her eyes seemed distant, unfocused. The groom smiled nervously, unaware. The organ played a soft hymn, filling the space with calm. Yet the preacher felt a chill crawl up his spine. A quiet whisper in his mind urged him to look closer. The bride stopped abruptly at the altar. The congregation murmured, confused. The preacher cleared his throat, his voice firm. He asked her a simple question. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then he saw it, a small, trembling hand clutching a folded piece of paper inside her bouquet. The paper shook violently, as if alive. The preacher stepped closer, heart pounding. The bride's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face. He gently took the bouquet, the paper unfolded. In his hands, it was not a note. It was a photograph that made. The room fall silent. Faces turned pale. The groom's smile vanished. The bride's lips quivered, and she whispered a single word no one expected. The word hung in the air, like a dark cloud. Every eye in the church widened. The photograph slipped from the preacher's trembling fingers. It floated to the floor, face up. The image showed the bride, but not as she appeared now. Her eyes were black, hollow and cold. Her smile was twisted, unnatural. The preacher's stomach tightened. He took a cautious step back. The guests whispered in confusion, unease spreading like wildfire. The bride's hands shook violently. Her breathing grew rapid, shallow. A faint humming sound began in the room, soft at first, almost like a lullaby. Then it grew louder, echoing off the walls. The chandelier above rattled. Candles flickered as if caught in an invisible wind. The preacher raised his voice. Trying to regain control, he demanded she speak, explain, anything. Her lips moved again, but the sound that came out was not human. It was a harsh, grating voice layered over her own. The congregation gasped. The groom took a step forward, but froze. His face drained of color. The humming intensified, vibrating through the floorboards. The bride's body shuddered violently. Her veil lifted slightly, though no one touched it. And then she turned to look directly at the preacher. Her eyes, now fully black, burned into him. A chill raced down his spine, paralyzing him. He stumbled backward, knocking over a pew. The church fell into a heavy silence. Every breath felt loud, every heartbeat deafening, and in that silence, a single word escaped the bride's lips, clear, echoing, and terrifying. Run. The word run echoed through the church like a warning bell. The guests froze, eyes darting around in panic. The preacher's hands trembled, heart hammering in his chest. The bride's body convulsed, but her movements were unnatural, jerking in impossible angles. A sudden gust of wind slammed through the open doors, scattering petals and papers. The stained glass windows rattled violently, casting jagged shadows across the walls. The groom stumbled backward, tripping over a chair, his face pale as death. The humming had grown into a deafening roar, vibrating through every bone in the room. The bride lifted her head unnaturally high, and her mouth opened far wider than it should. A cold, dark energy seemed to pour from her, filling the church with an icy, suffocating weight. The preacher shouted, trying to reach her, but his voice cracked. Then the lights flickered once, twice, and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. A single, piercing scream cut through the black. When the lights returned, the bride was gone. The bouquet lay on the floor. Wilted and trembling, the photograph had vanished. The guests were frozen, staring at nothing, unable to speak. The preacher stepped forward cautiously. The air still hummed with an unseen presence. He whispered to himself, a shiver crawling down his spine. She was never meant to be here. Outside, the wind howled, and somewhere, far off, a faint echo of laughter drifted through the trees. The guests slowly began to stir, but the unease lingered like a shadow. The preacher's hands still shook as he picked up the fallen bouquet. Every petal felt icy cold, as if drained of life. The groom sank to the floor, head in his hands, unable to speak. Outside, the wind whipped through the empty streets, carrying whispers he could not understand. The preacher stepped toward the doorway, peering into the dim light of the evening. Something moved in the distance, just beyond the tree line. A fleeting shadow, impossibly fast, vanished before he could focus. He felt eyes on him, though no one was there. Sudden sense of wrongness prickled at the back of his neck. He turned back to the church. The doors had swung shut on their own. The hum that had filled the church now thrummed faintly through the walls, as if the building itself remembered. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The photograph, the black eyes, the warning, everything replayed in his mind. A thought gripped him, icy and certain. She was not gone, not entirely. The preacher reached for the phone to call for help. The line was dead. A faint creak came from the balcony above. He looked up, and there she stood, the bride, half shrouded in shadow, staring silently, eyes still black. The wind outside ceased, leaving a heavy, suffocating stillness. Her lips moved, forming a single word without sound. The preacher felt it in his chest, a warning that went beyond hearing. Forever. The word forever hung in the air like a curse. The preacher stumbled backward, heart pounding, sweat beading on his forehead. The bride took a slow step forward, though her movements were impossibly smooth, almost floating. The shadows around her twisted unnaturally, stretching across the walls like dark fingers. A low, guttural hum began, vibrating through the floor, the pews, even the preacher's bones. The guests tried to scream, but no sound came out. The bride's gaze locked on the preacher, piercing deeper than any blade. He felt his knees weaken, as if invisible hands were pressing him down. The bouquet in his hand trembled violently, petals curling in on themselves like burning paper. Then, without warning, the doors of the church slammed open with a deafening crash. Sunlight poured in, but it brought no comfort. The bride's figure blurred, flickering in and out like a broken reflection. The preacher reached out, desperate, his voice finally breaking free. "Who are you?" he shouted. Her black eyes glimmered with something ancient, something cruel. A chilling smile curved her lips. And then, with a speed that defied reason, she vanished. The hum stopped instantly. The doors creaked closed on their own. The guests collapsed to the floor, trembling and gasping for breath. The bouquet lay on the altar, still quivering. No photograph remained. The preacher's mind raced. He realized the truth in a bone-deep certainty. She had never intended to marry. She had come for something far older, and she had left a warning that would haunt him forever. From that day on, every quiet corner of the church, every shadow in the aisle, seemed to whisper her name. The bride was never truly gone. Days passed, but the memory of that day lingered like smoke in the preacher's mind. The church felt different. The sunlight through the stained glass no longer warmed the pews. Every shadow seemed too long, too alive. He found himself checking the doors. the windows, even the corners of the sanctuary, expecting her to appear. The bouquet remained on the altar, petals slightly curling, never wilting completely. At night, he heard whispers, faint but unmistakable, drifting through the halls. He would wake to the sensation of someone watching. Though the church was empty, the groom never returned. The guests told their stories, each more unsettling than the last. Some swore they glimpsed her figure in mirrors, just for a moment. Others heard footsteps echoing behind them when no one walked. The preacher could not escape the feeling that she had marked the church, and him, in a way that would last forever. Then, one evening, as he prepared the candles for service, a note appeared on the altar. It was folded neatly, the handwriting elegant but unfamiliar. He opened it with trembling hands. The message was simple. "You cannot forget me. I am always here." The lights flickered. The air grew cold, unnaturally so, and from the shadows, a soft, almost playful laugh echoed, faint, yet filled with malice. The preacher realized the chilling truth. The bride had never left. She was waiting for the next moment, the next ceremony. Forever one night, the preacher could no longer bear the silence. He walked down the aisle, candle in hand, heart hammering. The bouquet on the altar quivered as if alive. The shadows seemed to shift around him, moving with intent. A soft, cold wind swept through the church, though every window was closed. Then he heard it, the faintest rustle of a dress behind him. He spun around. The bride stood there, fully visible now, her black eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight. Her lips curved into a slow, terrifying smile. "You called me here," she whispered, though the voice sounded inside his head. The preacher stumbled back, gripping the candle like a lifeline. Why are you here?" he demanded. Her smile widened, impossible and unnatural. "To watch, to wait, to remind," she said. The air grew heavy, pressing against his chest. The bouquet lifted slowly, petals swirling in a cold, invisible wind. Her figure shimmered, flickering between human and something else. The preacher felt himself pulled forward, unable to resist. "You cannot leave," she whispered, stepping closer. The shadows stretched toward him like dark arms. Every heartbeat echoed in his ears. Louder and louder, then with a sudden rush, the church plunged into darkness. A scream tore from his throat, raw and unrestrained. When the lights returned, the altar was empty. The bouquet lay on the floor, still quivering. The preacher was alone, but he knew she had not left. Somewhere, in the corners of the church, in every shadow, she was waiting, watching, forever. The preacher could not sleep that night. Every shadow in his home seemed to stretch toward him. Every creak of the floorboards made his heart leap. He tried to tell himself it was his imagination, but he knew better. Faint rustle came from the corner of his room. He turned, slowly. The bride stood there, not fully formed, like a shadow stitched together with darkness. Her eyes glowed faintly, unblinking. "You cannot hide," she whispered, voice soft and cruel. The preacher stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. The walls seemed to pulse. Closing in around him, the candle in his hand flickered and died. Darkness swallowed him completely. A cold hand brushed his shoulder. He could feel her presence wrapping around him. Patient, inevitable. "I am always with you," she breathed. The preacher could not speak, could not move, could not escape. And in the silence that followed, a chilling realization sank deep into his bones. He had become part of her world. There was no running, no hiding, only her, forever. The preacher awoke in the church the next morning. The pews were empty, the sunlight streaming through the stained glass, but something felt wrong. The air was heavier than it should be, thick with a presence he could not name. The bouquet lay on the altar, petals blackened at the edges as if burned from the inside. He took a step forward, heart hammering. Then he noticed it. Every mirror in the church reflected her. Not the preacher, not the room, Only her, standing just behind him, eyes black and unblinking. She smiled, slow and cruel, leaning closer in every reflection. The preacher spun around. The church was empty, yet the whispers started again. Soft at first, then louder, echoing from every corner. Forever, forever, forever. He ran toward the doors, but they would not open. The shadows on the walls began to move independently, stretching toward him, thickening into shapes he could not comprehend. And then he realized the truth that froze him completely. She was never a person. She was a curse, a darkness that could enter, linger, and consume. The preacher dropped to his knees, gasping. The reflections in every mirror began to ripple, and her face emerged from each one, and in unison, all of them whispered cold and clear, "You belong to me, forever." The doors slammed shut. The church plunged into darkness, and the preacher vanished. Only the bouquet remained, quivering gently on the altar, waiting. Weeks passed. The church stood silent, empty, yet no one dared enter. Locals whispered about strange lights flickering through the stained glass at night. Some said they heard faint laughter, soft and cruel, drifting on the wind. The bouquet remained on the altar, petals still trembling, never wilting. No one could explain why. A young couple once tried to hold a ceremony there. They left halfway through, pale and trembling, claiming they felt eyes watching them. The preacher's home was abandoned, left as if he had simply vanished. But sometimes, late at night, neighbors reported seeing a shadow in the window, a figure standing still, unblinking, and every time they swore they heard a whisper, "Forever." The bride was gone from sight, but her presence lingered. The church, the shadows, even the air itself seemed tainted. It was a warning, a reminder. No one who encountered her, or the bouquet, would ever truly be free. Some say, if you enter the church at the wrong hour, you can feel her watching, waiting for the next soul foolish enough to step inside. And when the wind carries that soft, haunting whisper through the halls, it is a sound no one forgets. Forever. Years passed. The church became a place avoided by all, whispered about in fear. Tourists and thrill-seekers dared to peek inside, but none stayed long. Some reported seeing a figure in the shadows, always at the altar, always silent. The bouquet remained, wilted but quivering as if breathing. No one touched it. Late at night, the wind carried her whispers through the empty streets. Those who heard it reported dreams filled with darkness, shadows that followed them home. The preacher was never found, but sometimes, when the moon is high, people swear they see him kneeling at the altar, his face pale, eyes wide, staring into the bouquet, and in every reflection, every shadow, she waits. Patient, unyielding, her black eyes watching, her voice echoing through time, forever. No matter where the years go, the darkness lingers. The bride is not gone, she never leaves, and those who step too close, who dare to look into her eyes, will understand there is no escape. Forever. Time passed, but the story of the bride did not fade. Children whispered about her at night, daring each other to approach the church. One stormy evening, a curious traveler entered, drawn by the tales. The doors creaked open as if inviting him in. The bouquet lay on the altar, petals trembling, bathed in flickering candlelight. The shadows stretched unnaturally, forming shapes that seemed almost human. A cold breeze brushed his neck. Though no windows were open, he felt eyes on him. Then he saw her. The bride stood at the altar, black eyes glowing, her presence filling the room like ice. She smiled. "Slow and cruel. You came," she whispered, her voice inside his mind. He tried to move, but his legs refused. The shadows wrapped around him. Pulling him closer to the bouquet, he reached out, compelled by a force he could not resist. The moment his fingers touched the petals, the church went silent. He collapsed to the floor, paralyzed. And in the darkness, the whisper returned. Stronger than ever, forever. The traveler vanished, leaving nothing behind. The bouquet trembled on the altar. The church waited. And somewhere, in the shadows, she watched. Always. Forever. Years turned into decades. The town changed, new families moved in, but the story never left. The church sat abandoned, its doors chained. Yet sometimes they would swing open on their own. The bouquet remained on the altar, petals quivering as if breathing. People passing by swore they could hear soft laughter echoing from within. One evening, a young girl peeked through the broken doors. Her eyes widened as she saw the figure at the altar. The bride stood there. Black eyes gleaming in the shadows, a cold whisper brushed her ear. Do not leave. Forever. The girl stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold. But when she looked again, the bride was gone. Yet the feeling remained, eyes watching, shadows moving, waiting. The townspeople began to notice strange occurrences. Objects moved on their own, footsteps echoed in empty streets. Mirrors reflected glimpses of her face, even when no one was there. And those who dared to speak her name at night would awaken to find a single black petal on their pillow, a warning, a reminder that she was always watching, and the curse was spreading. The bride did not stay in one place. She waited, patient, unyielding, invisible to most, but always near. Every whisper of wind, every shadow, carried her presence, and somewhere, always, she repeated the same chilling word, forever! The bride's presence no longer stayed confined to the church. Travelers passing through the town sometimes felt her gaze. Even miles away, a businessman on a highway noticed a shadow in the passenger seat. Black eyes staring silently. A woman in a distant city woke to find a single black petal on her nightstand, though she had never left her apartment. The whispers began to travel with the wind, drifting into homes, offices, and empty streets. Those who heard them felt compelled to look over their shoulders, though no one was there. News reports started mentioning strange disappearances, always near places with shadows that seemed alive. People spoke of a chill in the air that could not be explained, a pressure on their chest as if unseen eyes watched constantly. The preacher was long gone, but his warning echoed. She never leaves. She waits. She spreads. And those who encounter her are marked for what no one truly understands. The bouquet, once confined to the altar, appeared in different places, always trembling, always waiting. A child found it in a park, a hiker stumbled across it in the woods, and each time, the whispers returned, louder, insistent, forever, forever, forever. The bride's curse had grown unstoppable. Her black eyes watched from every shadow, every reflection, every corner of the world. No one was safe. No one could escape. And somewhere close enough to hear her voice, she whispered again, forever. The whispers traveled faster than the wind. Cities, towns, and villages. No place was safe. People reported fleeting glimpses of her in mirrors, in windows, in car headlights. A commuter on a train saw her standing silently on the platform, eyes black, though no one else noticed. The bouquet appeared inexplicably, in offices, in hotels, on park benches, always trembling, always warning. Those who touched it vanished without a trace. Governments could not explain the reports, dismissed them as mass hysteria. But those who had seen her knew the truth. The bride's presence could not be contained. She moved unseen, relentless, patient. Every shadow became a possible doorway, every reflection a mirror of her eyes. A chilling realization spread among the few who understood. She was no longer just in one town. She had become everywhere. And the whispers were no longer distant. They were inside minds, echoing thoughts, making hearts pound. Stealing sleep, every photograph, every mirror, every reflective surface was a potential trap, and those who dared speak her name aloud often found themselves unable to stop, repeating it until exhaustion claimed them. Forever, forever, forever. The bride's curse had grown into a living, breathing entity. She did not need the church. She did not need the bouquet. She only needed eyes to watch. And somewhere close enough to feel her presence, she whispered once more, "Forever." The world had become her altar, and humanity, her congregation. No one was safe. Even the most crowded streets could not hide from her gaze. People caught glimpses in shop windows, in car mirrors, in puddles reflecting streetlights. Her black eyes pierced through the world, patient, unyielding. The bouquet had multiplied, on doorsteps, in offices, in schools, always trembling, always a warning. Those who saw her fully disappeared. Not a trace remained. Governments tried to intervene. Scientists investigated, but every measure failed. Her presence was intangible, unstoppable. The whispers grew louder, not just in minds, but in the wind, in buildings. In the rustle of leaves, the world began to change. People avoided mirrors. They refused to take photographs. Even windows became sources of fear. She was everywhere, every shadow a doorway, every reflection a trap. The few who resisted were haunted, waking in cold sweat, hearing her single word echoing forever. Cities fell silent at night, afraid of the darkness that could reveal her. And the bride waited. Patient, relentless, invisible to most, but always watching. Every heartbeat, every thought, every shadow belonged to her. The world had become her church, and humanity, unwittingly, her congregation, forever. The world grew quieter, but the silence was deceptive. In homes, in offices, in empty streets, shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far. Mirrors reflected more than reality. They reflected her. The bouquet appeared wherever fear had taken root, trembling, blackened petals curling like claws. People learned not to look, not to speak her name, not to acknowledge her presence. Yet even in avoidance, she was there. She watched from reflections, from corners, from the spaces between light and shadow. Children whispered stories at night, warning each other of eyes that follow. Travelers felt her breath on the back of their necks. Even in far-off cities, the preacher's fate became legend, a cautionary tale. But his story was only a fragment. Her curse was not confined to time, or space, or memory. She could touch anyone, anywhere, at any moment, and sometimes, when the wind carries a faint, icy whisper, people swear they hear it clearly. Forever, forever, forever. No door can lock her out. No mirror can hide her. No mind is safe from her. Watchful gaze. The bride is eternal. The bride is everywhere, and the world unwittingly has become her church. Forever. Even decades later, the whispers persisted. The bride's shadow could be felt in every darkened alley, every quiet room, every abandoned building. No matter how far people traveled, she followed. Planes, trains, ships. None could escape her reach. The bouquet appeared in the most impossible places, on hotel beds, in forest clearings, inside locked cars, always trembling, always watching. Those who touched it disappeared. Entire families vanished, leaving only an eerie emptiness behind. Reflections betrayed her presence. Mirrors became warnings. Puddles became portals. People learned fear in a new way, never safe, never alone. The preacher's warning had been only the beginning. She no longer needed a church to dwell in. The world itself was her altar. Every heartbeat, every whisper, every shadow belonged to her. And somewhere, in the edges of vision, a faint, cruel smile always lingered. Her black eyes never blinked. Her voice never ceased. Forever. The bride had become not just a legend, not just a curse, but a presence, an inevitability, and she would wait, always, forever. Years passed, but the world never forgot. Even in places she had never been, people felt her presence. Shadows shifted unnaturally, mirrors shimmered, reflecting something just beyond reality. The bouquet appeared in the most impossible locations, on crowded subway seats, In empty classrooms, on beds where people slept, her whispers followed people home, soft but insistent, echoing inside their minds. No one could escape. Cities grew wary of darkness. Homes were abandoned. Even daylight offered no safety, for her eyes could appear in reflections, in glass, in water. The bride was no longer a person. She had become an inevitability, a presence that could touch anyone, anywhere, at any moment. And sometimes, when the wind shifted, people swore they could hear her soft, cruel whisper, "Forever." The preacher's story had been only the beginning. The world itself had become her church, and humanity, unwitting, unprepared, helpless, was her congregation. She waited, always watching, always patient, always there, forever. Time itself seemed to bend around her presence. People who tried to forget her found their memories invaded, faces, shadows, whispers bleeding into their thoughts. The bouquet appeared wherever fear lingered, on desks, in abandoned houses, in forests far from any town. Every reflection, every window, every puddle could reveal her eyes. Even those who never saw her directly felt her gaze. Heavy and unrelenting, whispers grew stronger at night, echoing through cities, through empty streets, through silent rooms. The bride no longer needed a church, a wedding, or a congregation. The world itself had become her altar. Every heartbeat, every thought, every shadow belonged to her. She waited, always patient, always watching, always near, and in the faintest rustle of leaves, the softest sigh of wind, people heard her eternal word, "Forever." The bride had become more than legend, more than curse. She had become an inevitability, a darkness that could touch anyone, anywhere, at any moment, and the world would never be free. Forever. Even the bravest dared not speak her name aloud. Those who did vanished without a trace, leaving only whispers in their wake. The bouquet appeared in the most impossible places: crowded trains, office desks, empty streets, always trembling, always warning. Mirrors became traps, reflecting her black eyes instead of reality. Shadows stretched unnaturally, moving independently, bending toward those who tried to hide. The wind carried her whispers into homes, into minds, into dreams. No one could escape. She no longer needed a church, a wedding, or an altar. The world itself had become her sanctuary. Every shadow, every reflection, every heartbeat belonged to her. She waited, patient, relentless, and everywhere. Just beyond sight or thought, she whispered the same word: "Forever." Time did not weaken her. Distance did not hide from her. Even death offered no refuge. She was eternal. She was inevitable. The bride's gaze touched everything, claimed everything, and her presence would never fade, and humanity, helpless, unaware, remained her congregation, forever. Generations passed, but the bride remained. Her shadow lingered in abandoned houses, in quiet alleyways, in empty fields. The bouquet appeared in the hands of those who feared least and most alike. Always trembling, always alive, mirrors betrayed her presence, reflecting her black eyes to anyone who dared to look. Even technology could not hide her. Screens flickered with her image. Cameras captured glimpses of her where no one stood. Whispers followed people across cities, across countries, across oceans. Sleep offered no respite. Even the bravest awoke to her watching. A faint chill brushing their neck, a whisper curling through their thoughts: "Forever." Time had no power over her. Distance had no meaning. Life and death were irrelevant. She was eternal. She was inevitable. And the world itself had become her congregation. Every shadow, every reflection, every heartbeat belonged to her, and she waited, patient, relentless, unseen, yet everywhere, forever. The world had grown accustomed to fear. Even ordinary places, schools, offices, parks, felt unsafe. The bouquet appeared without warning, trembling, petals curling like claws wherever someone dared to live, laugh, or dream. Mirrors no longer reflected reality, only her black eyes staring back, unblinking. Shadows moved independently, bending and stretching toward those who tried to hide. Whispers traveled on the wind, into homes, into minds, echoing endlessly, forever, forever, forever. No one could sleep, no one could hide, even death could not protect. She existed beyond time, beyond space, beyond human understanding. The bride was no longer just a person, or a ghost, or a legend. She had become a force, a presence, a curse that touched every shadow, every reflection, every heartbeat. The world had become her church. Humanity had become her congregation. And she waited, patient, relentless, watching, forever, even. The brightest cities could not hide. Her skyscrapers reflected her eyes in glass. Streetlights cast shadows that moved unnaturally. The bouquet appeared in impossible places, on cafe tables, park benches, even in locked rooms, always trembling, always alive. People began to fear reflections, avoiding mirrors and windows. Those who glimpsed her directly vanished, leaving nothing but whispers and trembling shadows behind. Sleep no longer offered peace. Dreams were invaded by her black eyes, her cruel smile, her whispered word, forever. She had become more than a bride, more than a legend. She had become inevitable. No one could escape her gaze, no place, no moment, no shadow was safe. She waited in every corner of the world, patient, relentless, eternal, and humanity, unwitting, fearful, powerless, was her congregation. Every heartbeat, every thought, every reflection belonged to her. She watched, she waited, forever. If you want, I can now write the ultimate, final, never-ending curse version, combining all previous sections into a single, continuous, audio-ready story with perfectly timed suspense, pacing, and terror for maximum impact. Do you want me to do that? No corner of the world was safe. Even the most mundane moments carried her presence, footsteps in empty streets, reflections in puddles, shadows stretching too long. The bouquet appeared in the hands of strangers, trembling, blackened petals curling like claws. Mirrors reflected her eyes, her smile, her impossible form, even when no one else could see her. Whispers traveled through the air, carried on the wind, inside walls, inside minds, forever, forever, forever. Those who tried to flee found her waiting. Planes, trains, forests, cities. Distance meant nothing. Death offered no reprieve. Time itself seemed to bend around her, carrying her from one place to another, always patient, always watching. She had become not just a presence, but an inevitability. The world was her church. Every heartbeat, every thought, every shadow belonged to her, and humanity, helpless, unaware, entrapped, was her congregation. She waited in silence. She moved unseen, and she whispered her eternal word, forever. Years passed, and the church remained deserted. But its silence was deceptive. In homes, on streets, every shadow seemed a little too long. People still shivered at the sight of the bouquet, its blackened petals seeming almost alive. Mirrors and windows reflected her eyes, her smile lingering as if she had never left. Then one day, a visitor stepped inside the church. The bouquet lay on the floor, still, but no longer trembling. The shadows had weakened. The air was calm. He stepped outside quietly, heart pounding yet carrying a strange sense of relief. For a fleeting moment, the fear had lifted. The church, now empty, held only memories and stories of what had come before, and the people understood. Every fear, every whisper would remain within its walls. But sometimes, time brings a measure of peace. That moment of calm, that silence, and those memories, all remained safely preserved within the church. And the world, at least for now, breathed easier, knowing that every story has an ending, though whispers never completely fade. The church, its shadows and its memories, forever preserved, yet softened by a gentle peace.